ecosystem services and river restoration. So I will be very brief. I will just give the floor to our colleague Irene Diti from the Emilia-Romagna region for a presentation on traditional fishing and environmental conservation in the Po Delta. Thank you, Irene. You will have 4 minutes.
Okay, I will share my screen. Okay. Okay.
Perfect.
Perfect. Sorry, I want to close the image. Okay. Today I'm Irene Diti. I'm a project manager for art in Emilia-Romagna society in Emilia-Romagna region, and I work for Delta Lady project. And today I want to explain you how in Po Delta Park River traditional fishing is connected to environmental conservation. The Comacchio Lagoon is located in northeast of Italy, between the Emilia-Romagna region and the Veneto. It is an extraordinary nursery habitat for some fish species, in particular the juvenile species, the juveniles, and they are both commercial and conservation interests, like eels, anchovies, shrimps, and mullets. But today I want to explain you how they perform the eel fishing that represent an important heritage of the ancient activity of local villagers, and it is comprised in the biggest category of lagoon aquaculture that in Comacchio are directly regulated by the Po River Delta Park Managing Authority. The Comacchio Lagoon require a continuous and expensive management of the several locks that permit the eel fishing and in general the lagoon aquaculture. In particular, in Lavorieri, they perform the eel fishing that during some special time with cold wind and big moon, they have to open the eels want to return to the sea for the reproduction, and in this moment the fisher can catch them, and using this system of locks, and they required time and maintenance to perform a good fishing. What is the main result of this good practice performed in Po Delta Park? We want to explain you that this is an implicit payment for ecosystem services scheme, because the revenues generated by fishing is invested by the Po Delta Park Managing Authority in the environmental conservation and management of the lagoon. So they present this kind of scheme that guarantees the habitat and fishery conservation. Moreover, part of the catch is directly sold to local community, contributing to local sustainable development and the preservation of cultural value. This practice involves different stakeholders and beneficiaries. It generates direct and indirect job position for local community. And in particular, it's important to underline that the Weir Delta Park Managing Authority achieved the goal of conserving habitat and species, maintaining traditional fishing practices, and supporting tourism in the lagoon. These activities started in 1991 with the management of the Weir Delta Park Managing Authority, and is still performed. This practice does need an external financial resources. It's managed by the internal staff of the park, both seasonal and permanent, and the salary of this internal staff is paid with the revenue generated by fishing. The total revenue generated in 2018 was around 190,000 euro, of which 25,000 derive came from direct sold of eels to local population, and the day of sales represent an identity cultural value that we can call the ecosystem service of sense of place. In the 2018, as you can see in the table, around 19,000 of used for the environmental management and cultural heritage, and because in 2018 they restore Marinata, the manifatturiera dei Marinati. I'm sorry for this kind of misunderstanding. That is the place where they made the marinade eels. That is a local product they sell in all Italy and for tourism also over the over the border of Italy. And that my time is okay. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Irene. Tell me.
Stop. Thank you.
We will move back to you for the discussion later. Now it's time for Ivona Wagner, professor at the University of Łódź, who will talk about the role of nature-based solutions in the restoration of the Sokołówka River. Sorry about my pronunciation. My Polish is not very good at the moment. The floor is yours for 4 minutes. Thank you.
That was a good start for your Polish. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me in to this online thematic workshop. I will have a pleasure to show you a case from Łódź, which is representing the project AQUARES Interreg Europe. And actually what I want to talk about is the role of the nature-based solutions in the restoration of the Sokołówka River, which is an urban river flowing in the city of Łódź in Poland. Well, the problems of the Sokołówka River are those typical for the small urban rivers. It is hydrologically unstable, it is polluted, it is mostly supplied by the stormwater and meltwater from the very urban catchment of a mixed use. Additionally, on this river, there is a cascade of the retention ponds, which are very often used by the inhabitants of the city for recreation. Many people just spend there not only weekends, but sometimes even the less wealthy families spend their time in the city of Łódź, which is full of small rivers, and they do not sometimes even go for the holidays outside. So the quality of the rivers is of a very high social importance. So the challenges are the hydrological stress, water pollution, cyanobacteria blooms sometimes, and the restriction of the recreational use then. So there was a need for the efficient stormwater retention and purification in the river. So this is a very schematic drawing of the river. It flows this direction, and what we did within the project which was developed on the river, we have built many things, but based on the nature-based solution. So basically you can see that there are several different constructions which have different functions. So when you look from the upper part of the river, there is a detention pond which stabilizes the hydrology of the river, so it captures the high flows here in this area to stabilize it. The other one, stabilization pond, even stronger, strengthen the impact of the first one. Then we have different system for purification, and at the very end of it, there is a recreational reservoir which is already more stable and purified. We have also done a plan for the restoration of the river, which is not yet implemented, but the plan is in place. And several buildings around are implementing different measures on stormwater management and best management practices in this area. So the project was very complex, as you can see. One of the maybe most interesting things we did during the project is building a so-called sequential sedimentation biofiltration system, which is using different biotechnologies for cleaning the water from sedimentation to the biogeochemical zone which captures the nutrients, and also the constructed wetland at the end, which is purifying the rest of the water. Here you can see very beginning of the vegetation, so maybe it is not very outstanding, but this is what it was before. Now it's a really nice vegetated area which purifies the water. The experiences of this project were used to develop the concept of so-called blue-green network, which connects all the 18 rivers of Łódź and green areas into one functional systematic network of the blue and green infrastructure. And it was implemented in the studium of study of the development and the strategic conditions for development of Łódź. So it's kind of now basis for the implementation of similar solutions on many other rivers in the Łódź. Here you can see the sorry, this is my alarm. So here you can see the Sokołówka River on this map, and we have also written about this solutions and this project in the European Parliament magazines, showing the concept for the city using the blue-green infrastructure for the adaptation to global climate change. So talking about the budget for this particular project, it wasn't high, as you can see on my slide, but I have to add that also the city has contributed with its own budget, and now this is really a reason for application for new funds for developing similar solutions on other rivers in the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ivona, for this, for showing the fact that you need to act and like across the board when it comes to improving river conditions. And thank you also for highlighting the nexus that there is between the fact that we have the need to have clean waters on the one hand, and on the other hand, the fact that you needed to respond to also the social demand of from people reclaiming recreational places for themselves, and for, as it happens in your city, also spending the holidays sometimes. So now it's time for me to move to Joel Rhys-Jones from Natural Resources Weir to again go back to fishing in a way, river restoration, removal of barriers, and fishing. He will talk about the restoration of freshwater features in the River Dee on the basis of the activities that you are having in the context of your life project. Thank you.
Thank you. You hear me okay, yeah?
Perfectly well.
Okay. Right, thank you. Yes, so my name's Joel Rhys-Jones. I'm a project manager for the Life Dee River project. It's currently being carried out in the Welsh Dee up in North Wales. It's a £6.8 million project, so just under €8 million or so. And I lead a team of 8 staff on the project who work on it with me. And they include river restoration specialists, land management officers, monitoring officers, procurement, comms, and finance roles. So the Life project itself, the Life Dee River project, is a 5-year project running until the end of 2024. The funding has come from a number of different sources that are detailed at the bottom of the slide at the minute. It's quite an ambitious project, but river restoration is at its very heart. And the focus of the project that I want to best practice that I want to focus on today is the removal of barriers as a key element of river restoration. Barriers, obviously well documented, been talked about already, documented being one of the big issues for migratory fish population declines worldwide and throughout Europe and UK. Really, we are really excited to be able to, through this project, to be able to address this in some way. As part of the project, we're going to be removing at least 11 barriers on the Dee. The work will either be full removal or partial removal, which would always be best practice, going down through the creation of nature-like bypass channels, or in some cases, potentially a more formal fish pass option. Again, fish passes were mentioned earlier in terms of attraction and passage efficiency. Removal is a better option if you possibly can. It's not just for the benefit, removal is not just for the benefit of fish, but it's for all aquatic animals and also for all of the riverine processes to re-establish that would be impacted by a barrier. And it's also the most sustainable solution as it removes any need for any future maintenance on whatever structure it is that you're looking at and wanting to address. So one specific site that I want to highlight today is somewhere called Weir. The video I'm now playing shows salmon and sea trout trying and failing to pass the structure. To give some context, the site, it's about 50 kilometers upstream from the tidal limit on the Dee. Has a head difference about just over 2.5 meters. There is a bulk fish pass you can just see in the background of the video, but it is in a state of disrepair. There is evidence of some sort of structure being at the site since the 11th century, so clearly significant, from a heritage perspective that needs to be considered during any partial removal. As you can see from the video, Weir is a partial barrier to salmon and other migratory fish, but also it's always been given as the upstream limit for sea land prey on the Dee, which reduces their expected range by at least over half. As expert opinion is that it should be able to migrate at least 100 kilometers upstream on a river such as the Dee. This drone photo shows the structure, just to give a bit clearer of an image of the site, and what we're proposing to do is remove the area indicated in red. So this will leave a gap that's sort of consistent with the natural river width expected in the area, upstream and downstream, and the removal of the weir will be down to bed level. Benefits for partial removal at the site are numerous, but the main ones obviously improved connectivity for migratory fish and increased range for sea land prey. But there's also significant improvements in those geomorphological riverine processes that are going to be able to occur going forwards, benefiting the area upstream, it's currently impounded, but also significant downstream, distance downstream, again with benefits to the aquatic habitat. And as I said earlier, removal or partial removal is a sustainable option, ensuring the solutions that we carry out today work for generations to come. In terms of sort of outputs, I mean, Claire mentioned right at the beginning, there are 1.2 million barriers estimated to be across Europe. We want to remove 11, which doesn't sound an awful lot given the scale of the project. But for me, the key thing is that importance of that barrier location when you're deciding on your work. So, for example, removing Weir and some of the other weirs upstream will open up access for sea land prey to an additional 111 kilometers of the Sac River, which, an increase of over 120%, massive increase. And you can see that from the maps on the right hand side there. Thank you very much. Real brief summary. If you'd like to keep updated, drop me an email. I can add you to our newsletter or follow us on the social media. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Thank you, Joel, for your presentation. It was very good to go back to the removal of barriers on rivers and to listen about your experience in Wales. So we had 3 presentations, very different ones, very varied ones. The first on sustainable fishing in a delta area. The second one on the application of hydroecological principles to clean a urban river. And then, as I said, we had Joel speaking about river barrier removal in the context of his life project. So, having said that, maybe now I can ask Emma Liberati from the ERN, Senior Policy Officer there, if she wants to comment on what we have just listened to and share her thoughts about this and any other views that you want to share on behalf of also your organization. Thank you. 8 minutes.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad to be here. So I'm an officer at European Rivers Network. We are involved in river conservation and restoration in Europe and also in France when we are based. And so I'm glad to discuss about your 3 presentations. And after I can also share with you an overview of the different ecosystem services we can find in our territories with the support. So first, to talk about the Po Delta, to me it's really an excellent example to how you can link every stakeholders. You can link the population, you can link in the economy as well. That's definitely what we try to do everywhere, but we don't manage. So I would like in particular to talk about a point when you said it's an implicit payment for ecosystem services, I think it could be interesting to compare your case, your implicit payment, with what happens in the explicit payments for ecosystem services. That's a point I find important. So the payment for ecosystem services are used to pay people to restore in their fields an environment. Actually, I will talk about the state of art of the research about it. There are some population when you make a payment for ecosystem services, which are not really involved in the ecosystem restoration, and so at the end of the payment, when the period ends, the people are not more aware of the environmental ecosystem services, and it makes it less sustainable. If we compare to the Comacchio Lagoon, it's definitely not a limit. It's completely the contrary, because it's included in the economy, and it's an identity of the population, so it's definitely not a constraint for them. And I find this point particularly interesting, is that way to manage a territory means that we don't need to require payment for ecosystem services, which are only a way to repair, finally, a lack of good practices, I would say. I can also compare the fishing practices with other methods which are used to conserve the environment. For example, if you want to make the conservation of a protected species, you can make quotas. You can also make no-kill fishing, for example, and those kind of practices can have on the population some side effects because they can feel it as a constraint. For example, you tell people not to fish, not to keep the fish. It can be a problem, and so it makes it less sustainable in some cases. While here, it's really the practice. It's the identity of the population. So, well, to end on the Podelta, I think it's really an objective we have to reach everywhere to find that balance between every stakeholder. Well, I talked a lot already.
Your time.
Yeah, okay. Well, for the Polish River, what I think about that is it highlights really the fact that in the urban development, maybe we didn't pay attention enough to the rivers when we built the cities. And we can see the consequences. We have to make nature-based solutions on territories which are not taken into account the quality of the river before. And now that we have problem of flooding, of bad water quality, after we need to repair our mistakes, I would say, and to involve a researcher and a lot of not only money but also people, development of technologies, and finally, if we kept the river in good state since the beginning, maybe we would have less solutions needed after. But I think that this case is this good practice is a really good compromise between the ecological status of the river, which is not it's not given by these solutions, by the ponds, by the ponds with water treatment. It doesn't allow us to have a good status of rivers, but it's needed because of the urban area. So it's definitely a compromise. And on top of that, you also plan to make a restoration of the river, if I remember well. So definitely, I think this compromise is really good, and it shows the importance to link the water management plans to the urban guidelines, definitely. And about the Dee River, I can only say again that the benefits of dam removal. At European River Networks, we are involved a lot in dam removal, and particularly big dams. That's our, the main our main domain of action, I guess. So, as Claire Baffer said at the beginning, it's the action which is the most cost-effective. When we remove a dam, we enable the river to restore by itself, to find its morphology during the thousands of years coming. So it's definitely an action that we need to set in every territories, and not only restoring continuity by fish passes and other techniques, because we know that especially for endangered species, it's not enough. You have a accumulation of the impacts. And even if you equip each dam with a fish pass, you will always have a strong impact on the species, on the fish migrators. And in the case of the Dee River, I think that it follows definitely the advices about how to make a restoration plan on a territory. Because currently we prefer to group all the actions on the same place, and to make them very ambitious by the choice of the type of action, and to group really, because grouping action will have more effects than disseminate the action. So I think it's a good example of what we should do on each territory. We should consider the budget we have, select a part of the territory, and set up all the actions in the most ambitious way we can do with a budget, the precise budget, because it's sure that the effects will be really huge on the Dee River. Well, what can I say? Maybe I can show my support and give an overview.
Yes, please.
Of how many time do I have?
1 minute, 2 minutes maximum.
Okay, fast. So, okay, I just would like to give you an overview of all the ecosystem services we can benefit when we talk about river restoration. So you can see on the left all the different ecological services which exist. I will talk especially about the chart, the picture which is on the bottom, to go fast. So on the bottom you can see a picture which presents all the regulation services given by a river. So the regulation services are about, for example, hydric flows, because a river in good status can store a lot of water in the soil during flood events. There is also okay. A river in good state has also a strong role in flood and drought mitigation, because we know that the storage which is made as well in the groundwater and as well in the soil on the river banks will be a really important tool to fight against climate change. For example, in my basin, in the Loire basin, we know that we are going to lose 25% of our summer flow by 2050. And the only way to reduce and to mitigate that loss is definitely to restore rivers. Well, there are also other ecosystem services provided by the river, the supply services, as we see in the case of fishing, for example. For example, the artificialization of rivers can reduce fish biomass by 80% or more. So we can guess the impact on fishing and the necessity to conserve the river in a good status. The other case of services is about the cultural services, those who are intangible, tourism, values we can share, sports, etc. Well, just yeah, when you restore a river, some researchers had proved that you can restore 44% of biodiversity and 25% of ecosystem services. An example here, it's a river, the Valserine River, in a very good status in France. And a study had been made to assess the ecosystem services. And each year, the river can permit to save 1.8 million euro per year. Then to finish, how to take into account the ecosystem services in territorial development. There are 3 ways to take them into account. First, it's about information of the population and awareness. The ecosystem services are a great tool to explain people about the interest of having a river restored. So you can mobilize case studies, finding of the research, and it's a really strong tool to explain people, for example, political choice. Second point, it's a decision support at local scale. So you can, thanks to ecosystem services, facilitating dialogue between different stakeholders, which have very different activities about the rivers and interests. And so it's a way to gather people around the same interest, finally. And then finally, there is nowadays an economic approach of the ecosystem services. It's currently developing. The method is not, has a lot of points to develop still. And this economic approach can help to management and to financing the action of restoration. There are a lot of limits which are pointed by people about this economic approach today. It's to the merchandising nature, for example, and there are still a lot of limits in the method, and we cannot really assess the economic value finally of a natural ecosystem. So it's just a tool, but a tool among others. We can use economic approach, but it's not definitely not the main issue about ecosystem services.
Okay.
Okay. I think I'm done.
Thank you very much, Emma, for commenting on our 3 good practices and for also further sharing your views and advice. So we have just a little above 10 minutes for the discussion. Does anybody wants to intervene, take the floor with comments? No, maybe I can start breaking the ice on the basis of what Emma said. For example, on the presentation of Irene, Emma said that the results that you have achieved in the Po Delta River is amazing because you managed to put together a lot of stakeholders. So a very direct question, what is the secret for doing that?
Okay, I think that this question have to be, you do have to ask to the director and the president of the park that in last 20 years work a lot to valorize the ecosystem services in the park and to valorize, to make the inhabitant of the park and the tourist conscious of the value of the area. And I think that they construct a lot of the people trust in the structure of the park, and for example, for fishing, for hills fishing activity is a very important identity element in the Comacchio history. And so I think that they need time the focus point is that the people have to recognize that the park and the natural area of the park have value not only for the landscape but for the places that they give. And in last year, this kind of ecosystem services approach going on.
You are frozen at the moment, unfortunately, Irene.
And I think that is the base practice or hunting or some other good practice that they use for that they perform as a park managing authority.
Okay, thank you for this. And I also guess you're going to continue investing on sustainable management of the area in the context of the recovery. I saw in the news that 55 million project has been included in the Italian recovery facility plan that submitted to the European Commission for the renaturalization of the river. So I guess that activities will also be developed, further developed in the Delta area.
Yes, I spoke with the director this day, today, and they are waiting for a comment from the revision of the European Commission to start with not only ideas but practice activities.
Sure. Okay, so another good practice that we have, similar to the one of Irene, if you want to look it up, comes from the WLE project. It's an internet project. It's about reinvesting the revenues of sustainable fishing, also, which has been possible since a few years in northern Sweden, thanks to the removal of barriers on rivers there. And in that case, revenues are reinvested for environmental conservation in the area. So maybe if you want to look it up, the WLE project, Interact project. With regard to the presentation of Ivona, I suggest also that you, there is a question from Christoph.
Yes.
I see you there, yeah.
No, I have a remark.
Please go ahead.
Yes, I'm from Silesian region, southern part of Poland, and our challenge here is to protect some post-industrial areas which are working efficiently according to ecosystem services. Last year I have some project about Lipinka river, creek rather, and it was for me something astonishing that it is starting with the pond which is completely poisoned with heavy metals, because it is near the spoil heap of zinc smelter from the beginning of 20th century. It is very poisoned, but this creek is going for 1 kilometer probably through 2 ponds covered with reed. And after this 1 kilometer, this water is clear. There are living fisher kings, and it is proof for that. It is very efficient work of this reed on the way of this creek. It is really good working. 2 ponds, about half of a hectare, and it is enough to clear this water. Thank you.
Maybe Ivora, you want to comment on that?
Yes.
Well, what can I say? I think that thank you very much for this remark. I will with pleasure keep an eye on this project and the results of it. So I took a note of it already. And yes, that just confirms that nature-based solutions work, and that's what I sometimes say to many people that I work with. This is the free job that nature is doing for us, and we don't have to pay for that. But we need to give a chance and to really make the conditions for the nature for it to really provide the functions that it should provide. So the restoration is definitely the need in many rivers. And of course, different restoration efforts will have to be applied for different rivers of different characters, but also in different areas and different use. So something different for the urban river that I have presented, and which is in a completely different context, also in different contexts of the land use and the social expectations, different for the delta or for the natural rivers, and yet another nature-based solution for the poisoned river as this one. I think it's a very interesting case, so thank you very much for this remark.
Great. So everybody, I suggest also that you take a look at the AQUARES good practices on constructed wetlands. There are so many, and nature-based solutions to provide further insight on this. We have a question from our thematic manager, Elena, with regards to the Dee River project. This one is for Joy. I don't know if you see the question. So the question is, how do you deal with different interests of stakeholders, and how did you convince policymakers to make the courageous choice that you are doing with the Dee River project?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, because it is always lots and lots of different views on something and what is right and what is wrong. I think the way that I've found to get people to understand, or just talking to people, is the key. I think talk to people and let them know and let them understand what the impacts are of what's there and what the benefits are going to be. And you know, talking about sort of wider benefits as well. So, you know, the project on face value is a lot focused on fish, which is, you know, it is an important part of the project, but it's not the only thing. All those the geomorphological processes, those riverine, or the other protected species that we've got, invertebrates. Let people know about all of the knock-on benefits, and that's how you can persuade people, I think, to agree to stuff that they may well not have done initially. I mean, in terms of convincing the policymakers to make these courageous decisions, I think, you know, we have a policy that if we can remove structures, we will do. That is our best practice. It is what we should be doing. You know, that's not unique to us. I think, you know, an awful lot of jurisdictions have that. But it's quite a big move by NRW to get such a large project. You know, it's the biggest scale project we've got in Wales going in terms of river restoration. And that's the challenge, I think, actually doing stuff on a big enough scale to really see a difference.
Thank you, Joel, for your answer. So everybody, we have a couple of minutes left. So I want to thank you for the presentation, and also Emma for taking the floor again in the plenary session after this one to report back on what we have briefly discussed. So maybe anybody else would like to intervene, say something? We have Manuel. Hello, Manuel from Murcia. How are you? We don't hear you, Manuel. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I have this. I had disconnected the microphone. I would like to do a remarks, because in AQUARES project we have worked to match the solution based on the nature. Yeah. But I would like to say how, that the great limitation that we have had precisely with this kind of solution, especially with the new legislation of water reuse. As with the new legislation of water reuse, this solution based on the nature are not very useful for some purposes to reuse water. Is the only one that I wanted to say.
Thank you, Manuel, for this remark. But at the same time, I saw that in your projects, for example, you had nature-based solution, constructed wetlands applied in an agricultural context, which were very successful in Latvia, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
to improve the condition, the ecological status of some rivers, because that reduced the amount of treated wastewater that goes back to nature. So there is also that side probably to be reported. But thank you for your remark. Thank you, everybody. We are 3:45. So, Eugenie, I guess that now it's time to go back to the break rooms. No, we still have some time, Eugenie says. So if everybody else wants to intervene, Manuel, please. You still raise your hand? No, you're muted. Maybe
it was only a mistake.
It was a mistake. Emma, please go ahead.
Yes, I have a question about the Comacchio Lagoon. I would like to know if there is a problem of illegal captures which can threaten all the organization of this economy.
Emma, I'm not sure that I know, so I can answer to your question because I'm not involved in the managing authority, so I'm not sure. I can't answer to your question like about illegal fishing in the lagoon. I know that there is a system of control for fishing and hunting in the Pond Delta area. If you want to fish and if you want to hunt something in the Pond Delta Park, you need an authorization, and for hunting, we have on another good practice that we represent for the Delta project because the revenue for hunting are used also for environmental management. But I don't have any data about the magnitude of illegal fishing or hunting in the lagoon of Comacchio Park.
Okay. Right, thank you.
Thank you, Irene. We can always, if needed, go back to that in writing after the workshop. So Eugenie is informing us that the other working group is finished. It's time for us to go to the break rooms as well.